We're all working with the magic of compounding interest. And if you take a hit in any given year and your cash outflows go down, then your growth is going to be impacted. And so you have to know what you're in for.
Hey, journeyers. Welcome to the Journey to Launch podcast. Today we have guest Beth Pinsker. She is a financial planning columnist for MarketWatch. She's been a certified financial planner, CFP, since 2018. She's worked at Routers, Fidelity, amongst other places. And prior to covering personal finance, she was a film critic and entertainment business reporter. She has her first book coming out, probably maybe out by the time you hear it, maybe not, but coming out soon. It's called My Mother's Money, A Guide to Financial Caregiving. I'm so happy to have you on the show, Beth. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Beth, I definitely want to get into the wealth of information in your book where you are talking about how to care for people in your life as a caregiver and their money. But I do want to go back a bit into your history and your career because I love that you made a career out of writing professionally. And so I want to take it back a bit because I know I have a lot of people who are writers or want to be writers and want to know how to make that work for themselves. So can you take us back to what you thought you'd do in college? I think I saw you went to Harvard,
Yes.
and then
I always
what
wanted to be
happened
a
after
writer.
that?
Yeah, I always
Okay.
wanted to be a writer. I used to make little newspapers in my basement on when we first got a computer, and like make little newsletters and things like that and hand them out to people. That's just all I ever wanted to do. And my kids make fun of me. They say that I would. They don't understand how it is that I get paid for what I do because it would be what I do all day long, every day. Um, and so, yeah, I'm sort of just living out the thoughts in my head. It's very satisfying. I really love it.
I love that because honestly, I find I've interviewed a lot of people and where their creative and or professional endeavors are also their actual like true life dreams. Like if they weren't getting paid for it, they'll do it. But I also feel like there's so many people who are not able to get paid for what they actually like to do, and that's why they push themselves to perhaps finding and accomplishing the financial independence. They're trying to
Yes.
escape from their work. So I do want to get into kind of you honing in and making a career out of writing for those who are also figuring out or trying to figure out how they can do that too.
Yeah, I never thought that I would end up in financial writing. I started out as a film critic. I started out, I did that career path right out of college. I worked on my college newspaper, and I started to, I remember sending out 100 resumes. And I could not get a job before the end of college. And everybody around me, Harvard is a pretty intense place sometimes. And at the end of the year, right before graduation, it's very intense because everybody has something amazing to do. And I had nothing to do. I was just going to go home and do nothing. It was 1993. There was a recession. It was a bad time to be getting a job. And I actually found this letter when I was going through my parents' stuff. I had sent out so many resumes, it became like a family joke. And I sent a resume to my parents with a cover letter and asked to be their unemployed daughter and live at, and work for room and board as their unemployed daughter. And my dad sent me back a rejection letter. And it was the funniest thing. And I posted it on my social media a while back, and it was hysterical. Like, this is what goes for a joke in my family. Like, I can't get it. I'm just graduating from a high powered university and I can't get a job, and this is just what we poked fun at.
What was your degree in?
English, straight up English major.
English. Okay, I have a couple of questions. So you can tell me if like you don't want to talk about this, but I'm now thinking because if my even now to this day, if my kids think hopefully they have some direction of what they love by the time they get to college and they get into prestigious Harvard and they tell me they want to be an English major. Now, unless I have a lot of money just to like they could do whatever they want, I'm gonna be like, is there a better major
Well,
you could pick for the return? So what was that experience
I
like? Did you got yeah.
I live what I preach. I have a kid who's a music major. So I believe in following your dreams, and my parents believed in that. My parents, one thing I'll say about my parents, to draw it back to the book, my parents both died when they were 76, which I consider really young. My parents were 5 years apart, so they died 5 years apart, both at 76. And even though they died young, like they did not have, I don't think they had any regrets. They lived their lives to the fullest. And the example they set for me was like, do what you love, make sure that you're doing all the things that you love. Don't miss out on anything. And, don't answer to anybody else. And that's how they set it up for me. And I went out in the world. I think the only thing I could have done to disappoint them was become a stockbroker, and a Republican stockbroker. And I didn't do that. I was an English major, and I came out and went into journalism, and I ended up loving personal finance. I kind of got into it by accident, and it just was the thing that stuck with me, because it was like my natural mode of handling the world. I'm a single parent, or a divorced single parent, I should say. Um, and like I'm careful with my money, and it all personal finance makes sense to me. And so that's why I ended up doing this. That's why I ended up taking it really seriously and getting a CFP. um I did pass the Series 7 test, so I got close to being a stockbroker, but not enough to disappoint my parents.
Yeah, but I just actually love that you brought home that point of following what you truly loved, and also doing, still it's something you put work behind. You got a degree in it. You were very focused, and
Yeah.
so it wasn't just a hobby, but something that you really invested in, which was able to take you places. So I just think that's a really nice lesson as a parent myself now, who will have to help guide my kids and want them to be free in their choices and happy. It's, hey, like, are you committed to this thing, and do you really love it? And if you are, let's go for it. So I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you for reminding
The,
me.
the thing I tell my kids is that the jobs they're going to end up doing haven't been invented yet. So there's no reason to go down any particular path on a journey to one destination when you don't even know what that destination is at the moment. You're too young, and the world's going to change. And nothing anybody thought that, like, most of the jobs that are available today, I didn't even know, didn't exist when I was younger.
Right. I
So,
actually heard I recently heard I think it might have been a daily podcast episode about coding, and how, years ago coding was something they were pushing kids into because, oh, we're going to need coders, and now how that most of the people who are graduating with coding degrees can't get jobs because that's being taken by AI, and there's so much of that happening. So very interesting, which can
yeah.
probably be another episode. But Beth, tell me, so you said both of your parents passed away at what you feel is a young age, and then you had to take on this responsibility of caregiving while they were alive, but then now aftercare of their finances. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get more into the book?
Yeah, so I was kind of like your stereotype. Caregiving typically hits mid-career women, right around the age of 50. I was 51, got a phone call from my mom. She said she was having back surgery. I'm the daughter. Like that's you're on deck, right? My dad was already gone, and I'm the person that you call to take care of you in that situation. And she wasn't in any sort of other decline. Like, all her faculties were there. It was just the fact that she was having this surgery on her spine, and she didn't know how fast she would get back up to speed. So she just said, "Can you come and help me out with whatever I need, and we'll see where it goes." So I'm like, yeah, obviously I'm gonna say, do everything I'm supposed to do in that situation. But once I got into it, she started to have complications. There were lots of ups and downs. It was a very fast sort of 8, 9 months of in and out of very serious illness for her. And I ended up having to do a lot more than I anticipated in terms of taking over the daily management of her household. I'm an adult with 2 children. I manage a household. It's already hard to manage your own household. Like, she was a fully fledged adult with all the things that a fully fledged adult has: a mortgage, car payments, uh, cable bill, electric bill. I had to sit down and reverse engineer everything about her financial existence and then start managing it for the long term. Caregivers, how much can we afford? Can we afford to keep her where she is? And I had to sort of do all of that without much input from her because she was in and out of being able to focus on that sort of stuff. And so that becomes a big task, like that is a full-time job in and of itself to manage that for somebody else. And so the book goes into, like, I took all the financial planning courses. I, study this. I talk to people who do this every day. And none of that's in any of the books. Right? They will tell you the macroeconomic theory. They will, you can study, bond ratios and yields and all of that stuff. And nobody tells you how to transfer money from one bank to another bank, because they make that really hard. And there's no rule book for it because every bank does it a little bit differently. And you want to be power of attorney for your mom? Well, you're going to have to jump through hoops, and each bank is going to have a different set of hoops, and you're not going to have any standardization of any of it, and nobody tells you any of this. So I wanted to write a guidebook for somebody like me who is in that position and put it all together so that you knew from point A to point Z of how this stuff all fits together and works together.
Now, there's different stages of when someone can approach this task of
Yes.
being responsible for their parents or someone else's money, right? There could be a proactive way before the person gets sick. It could be the conversations you have before, right? Like that happens, or it happens while everything's going down. Can you talk about maybe that first part of before the person is sick or before things start happening, how you can approach that? Because I know some pushback, depending on culture and family dynamics, it can be difficult to bring that up to
Yeah.
someone.
I think the most important thing to tell people is that when you set up a plan for if you get sick in some capacity, you're not handing over any of the tasks. The legal document that you need in those circumstances is a healthcare proxy and a power of attorney form. And none of those come into effect until you are completely incapacitated. But the thing is, if you're incapacitated, you can't fill them out. So if you already need one, you're stuck. So that's why you want to do them when you're well, and they're conditional. They're like, if I should happen to be in a situation where I can't make decisions for myself, I want this person to act on my behalf. Some people freeze and say, oh, well, I don't want to hand over control of my whole life to my son or my daughter. I'm not ready for that. I don't need that. But you do need it because it's too late if something actually happens to you. And so every adult over the age of 18 needs these because, like, we're all independent legal human beings in the eyes of financial companies and healthcare companies. And so, like, the other day, my son is 19 and he's away at college, and I needed to make a doctor's appointment for him. And so I call up the doctor because, that's what moms do. And 19-year-olds are not like 19-year-olds in the past, and they still need you to make doctor's appointments for them. Well, they wouldn't let me. I couldn't even make an appointment for him without a healthcare proxy because he's a legal adult. Of course, I have a healthcare proxy for him, so I'm like, okay, well, do you want me to fax the form? Because, like, that's how I roll. I got one for him as soon as he turned 18. But, and also, I'm a divorced person. I'm not remarried. Like, nobody can make decisions for me. My mom was my person. And so when she passed away, I had to think about, like, oh, well, who's going to be responsible for me? Like, I have a boyfriend, but I'm not married to him. I have a 19-year-old kid who's not able to make all of these decisions yet. So, like, what am I supposed to do? So, I had to come to some resolution for that. In my mind, I ended up making it my son. Um, but I would know he would need help with anything. Like if something were to happen to me, he couldn't do all this stuff on his own. But, my book is an instruction manual, so he would be able to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love the idea of being so proactive, even with your own children, like knowing once they hit a certain age, you have to have these forms filled out. And then for yourself, who was that person for you? You have to think about those things. So not only thinking about your parents, but as the adult now,
Yeah.
who's going to be the person? Do you have your forms filled out?
So I suggest in the book that you like send out an email blast, like in your family. Like you should know in your world. There's also a thing for this in the book too. There's like a family map, and the map doesn't have all the lines connected because not everybody's related by blood, right? Um, and you just need to know who's in your orbit. If something were to happen to any of the people on this list, would they be calling me? Would I be the call that is made? And if so, you want to make sure those people have the right forms because otherwise you can't help them. So if it's Aunt Sue, your mom, your dad, a cousin, your elderly neighbor who has nobody else, your young adult children, whoever it is that's in your orbit that they would call you, you want to email blast everybody and say, where are we on this? Do you need a link? Do you need help with a download? Because it's going to take you 5 minutes. You can do it most places for free. I'll send you a link, download the form, sign it, and get it notarized. And then let me know where you are on that. And, if you're that person in the family that gathers everybody up like that and gets them to do stuff, make that your responsibility. It's an email. It's not a big, a matter of like a big amount of time. It's like email them a link and have them fill out a form.
And so forms, let's be specific. Which forms should they be wanting to take care of right away?
A healthcare proxy and a durable power of attorney.
So another thing that might pop up for people is, well, do I need to get an estate attorney and a lawyer to be able to do this, which then complicates things and then makes them take longer to execute on this?
Yes. So you can do those two things, generally speaking, without a lawyer. Like it's better to always have everything personalized and set to your locality and your circumstances. But those are pretty standard forms. And, you're not going to go too awry. If you're going to go do a will, a living will, a trust of any sort, well, trust, you actually need a lawyer. You can't really download those from the internet. So if you need anything like that, you're going to need to get an attorney. But think about it this way. You have young kids. You need a will. I have a list in my book of like circumstances, what you need for various plannings. You turn 18. You need that durable power of attorney and the healthcare proxy. You get married. You need to have something that states that you have a legal relationship with the person and some sort of division of the assets that you both bring to the marriage. You have kids. You got to name a guardian for them. What if something happened to you? Like, I admit that I kind of whiffed this in the beginning, right? I didn't get a will until my kids were about like 5 and 7. And those early years, my husband and I had talked about it and who we would want to be their guardian, and we had come to a resolution on that, but we never formalized it. And so if something would have happened to us, nobody would have gone to the person that we wanted our kids to go to. They would have gone to a family member. And, it would have been hard for them. And so when I got divorced, I was walking home. There was a really icy winter. And one of, like, I don't know if you remember, but it was like the black ice winter.
Mm.
And cars were skidding around everywhere. Like you
This is
couldn't
in New
even
York,
walk.
right?
Yeah. You couldn't
Yeah.
even walk down the sidewalk, and I thought, I was walking home one day, slipping and sliding. I was like, if I fell and hit my head right now, because I wasn't fully divorced yet. I was just separated. And I was like, all of my assets would go to the kids, but they would be in the control of their father. And that's not a situation I want because he's not responsible with money. So what do you do in that circumstance? Well, that's when you want to trust. Because a trust can divert that money from, because kids can't control money on their own. I was able to create a trust where my mother was the trustee. All my assets would go into the trust. My mother would control it for the benefit of my children. And, the kids would still go to my ex-husband if I were to die, but she at least would make sure that they were responsibly financially cared for. Um,
Yeah.
And that didn't happen until they were 5 and 7. And I was like, how did I survive sleeping like for those 5 to 7 years after I did? I was like, oh my God, like I should have, I don't know, understand what prevented me from doing that earlier.
Right.
I should have, but
Well,
I didn't.
I think I think for a lot of people it's just not thinking about it and just hoping nothing bad happens, because the amount of, whether it's emotional, mental or physical work to do it feels so heavy, like you said, based on all the responsibilities we already have. Managing your own life as a single person is like keeping up on all the appointments and things you
Yeah,
need to do and paying these taxes or bills, versus now you have kids, now you have parents to take care of. It's so much. So I can
yeah,
see why people bury their head under the sand, but it's so important that we, hopefully you're listening to this, wake up
yeah,
and get things done, because it is so important to be prepared.
yeah. I think people overestimate how hard it is because I put this in my book to be honest about things and be really detailed. Going to an estate attorney to get a simple trust drawn up, it's going to cost you $3,000 to $5,000. It cost my mom 5,000 and cost me less, because mine was less complicated because I have less stuff. Um, but it's like when you go to the doctor's office and you have to fill out the form. Like nobody says, "Oh, I'm not going to the doctor's office because I don't want to fill out my medical history form." Like going to an attorney to get this done, you're not doing it yourself. The whole point of hiring a professional is it like you give them a little bit of information, the same kind of information that goes on a medical form, and they go and do it for you. So when people say it's so hard, well, it's not really that hard. Um, like you got to fill out a couple of forms and write a check. And then I point out, because a lot of people don't understand this part of it, but the $4,000 I spent on my trust, let's just go with my mom's. The $5,000 my mom spent on her trust probably saved us from spending $10,000 to $15,000 after she died, or more even. But she put her house her apartment into a trust, and that allowed me and my brother to sell it immediately and not have to pay the mortgage and the electricity and all of that for months while we went through probate. And we didn't have to pay for an attorney to do like a very complicated probate. So her $5,000 saved us from tens of thousands of dollars of expenses on the other end of things. So if she hadn't had done that, we would have ended up paying more than she paid for that. So,
Right.
it's one of those things that like, okay, you can download this power of attorney from the internet for free, or for maybe, if you want to pay for a customized one, like $90 is the going rate. If you don't have that and you need it and you have to go to court, $18,000. It costs $18,000 and about a year of your life going in and out of court hearings to get guardianship over somebody. And it happens a lot. Like, look at Jay Leno. Jay Leno has been in the news because his wife has dementia, and he didn't have a power of attorney for her so that he could set up a trust. And so he had to go to court and get guardianship. And we know about this because guardianship is a public process. And the reporters are all over it. But it's an object lesson and a cautionary tale for the rest of us. Like, do you want to be in court, you know, uh, spending your time doing that and your money, or do you want to just download something in 5 minutes from the internet? Like, it's up to you.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you have a brother, so I know the other thing that happens is where there's more than one person and who can have a say or is involved with the aging parent or sick parent. How do you approach those conversations if there is a difference of opinion or maybe mistrust or people not getting along?
Yeah, luckily I didn't face too much of that. My mom made me and my brother co everything. So if we needed to make a decision for her, we had to agree on it. Luckily, we didn't have to make any really hard decisions that we disagreed on. But when it came to my son having to pick, uh, I didn't want him to make me and my ex-husband co co proxies on his healthcare form or co executors on his power of attorney form. Like that to me sounded like a disaster. And most attorneys I talked to for the book said making people co anything is kind of a bad idea. because you never know if that's going to turn into conflict. And the problem with all of this is that there's no arbiter for ending a dispute except for going to court. Like mom and dad, I was like, mom and dad are not coming back from the grave to like slap somebody on the
To
head
tell them what to do.
and knock
Right.
some sense into them. Like mom and dad are good at disputes like that, but nobody else can settle things. So if you get in a fight with a sibling and you can't settle it on your own, you're going to court. And court's a bad place to be.
So then is the recommendation, like, let's just say I am like I'm older, my kids are older now. Is it that I choose one kid where that might be an issue? If the other kids are like, why'd you choose them?
The
How do
attorneys
you,
I spoke
yeah.
to said that most of the conflict can go away if you discuss it.
Mm,
Um, so if mom leaves a will, and like oftentimes this is a scenario that happens. You have one kid who's a teacher and one kid who's a lawyer, right? One makes significantly less than the other, and mom leaves more money to the kid who's a teacher than the kid who's a lawyer who doesn't need it. And if you talk about it beforehand, nobody gets upset and nobody sues. If you don't talk about it, then the lawyer kid, gets to the reading of the will and is like, "What? Mom didn't want me to have the same amount as my sibling. I'm upset. That can't be true. I'm gonna sue." If you talk about it and everybody understands that this is your wish and you explain it, like, you know, child A makes less than child B, so I'm going to, make it equitable instead of being 50-50 fair, then people get it. Like, you can't really argue with that.
yeah,
So
reasonable people get it. You would
reasonable
think
people get
so.
it. Yeah.
But I'm also like thinking this is also another almost a tangential topic, but this also goes into a deeper conversation of just family dynamics and how you raise your children. Because as I think about raising my kids, I'm already setting the tone with them that just because your brother or sister got something doesn't mean you're going to get it. You don't need sneakers right now, but
Right.
they need sneakers. Their sneakers are falling apart, and so it's simple things. And I think it's the dynamics of a family, and it takes decades and generations almost, right? Like hopefully that it's not toxic to where if things if you when you pass, hopefully before your children do, that there is respect and common ground and understanding. But it's like if there was problems and the way you raised your kids wasn't like that, and you had dissension and drama and kids jealousy, and you kind of stoke that fire, then I can see how that's going to be all drama if you when you
Yeah.
pass too.
I talk in the book. We have one special item in our family, and that's a pair of candlesticks. And we're Jewish, so candlesticks have a lot of meaning. And they came over from Russia with the first ancestor who came over in the late 1800s. Under somebody's skirt leg, tied to their leg. Like it's got a great family history. They're very ornate. They're not worth very much money, but there's only one set of them, and they have been passed down since the 1800s. And the thing that my family did was, because it's a Jewish family and there's like a whole hierarchy and stuff, the candlesticks presumably always went to the oldest daughter. So they went from the person, Franny, who brought them over, to my great grandmother, then to her daughter, who was my grandmother, then to my mother, then to me. So they're sitting upstairs in my dining room right now. And, we don't think about gender the same way. We're not the same religious people that, first came over here all those years ago. And I don't know who I'm going to I haven't really settled and written down who gets the candlesticks, but like my brother and I didn't fight about them. My mom didn't specify anything, but my brother just assumed that we've always had this family thing where the oldest daughter gets the candlestick. So of course I'm the younger child, but the oldest daughter, the only daughter, and so I got the candlesticks. And I don't know which of my kids is going to get the candlesticks. I'm not going to decide based on gender. But it's a decision I have to face, and it kind of it kind of weighs on me a little bit because I don't know what's fair in that circumstance. Do I give them to the one who I think will have kids? I don't know at this point which one of them will have
Yeah.
kids. I don't know which one will be more religious than the other or would find more value in a pair of candlesticks. So, like,
Hmm.
they're too young right now to sort any of that out. So, right now, they're just happily sitting on a shelf, and we look at them and appreciate them, and I have no idea what I'm going to do with them.
And it goes to thinking about just while we're talking about caregiving and people who we are looking after their assets and things that matter to them, it's also thinking through what matters to us, especially as we are getting older and what happens next. I just think it's just being just thoughtful and
Yeah.
intentional about it, because your kids, whatever you decide or not talk about, like that all impacts your kids now when they come of age and need to help you.
Yeah. And there's also a financial planning element to it. If you're trying to be financially independent, in your 40s or 50s or whatever age you choose as your target, um, what's left over at the end. We all do these projections and we don't know. Like, I see some projections and people have their plans laid out and they have $3 or $4 million. Like, if they live till 90, the graphs go up and they're like, at the end of their life they have $3 or $4 million. And I'm like, well, what's the point of that $3 or $4 million? Like, you're controlling your spending right now and restricting in order to achieve financial independence. Um, but you could probably spend a little bit more. Like, you're going to have money left over in most of these circumstances. And, you have to decide what you're going to do with it. Um, I especially, I have this one part in my book where I talk about crypto. Um, because crypto is one asset where people don't like to give up control, and it's like a bearer bond, and whoever has the keys, can walk off with it. And so how do you leave your crypto, to somebody? Because you have to write down instructions, and nobody wants to write down instructions for how to leave their crypto. But it's the same thing if it's cash too. Like, you have to have a plan for it. Somebody's going to get it in the end if you have
Yeah.
leftovers.
It reminds me of Bill Perkins' book Die with Zero,
Die
and
with
that
zero,
thought
yeah.
process of actually winding down, where the goal is to not have anything and to spend that money or give that money away before you die. And it makes so much sense. I think often about one of my first purchase, my condo. I still own and rent it out, and my hope and goal is that it does stay within the family, and after I pass, it's an asset for them. But ultimately, unless I specify that it can't be sold, they can do. They could say, "All right, mom, you saved all this money. You didn't buy that nice car you and dad wanted. You did restricted all these things so that we could have these assets." And they have a different
Yeah.
mindset and view of what they want their life to be, and can't necessarily blame them for that either, which is why there has to be like this thought process of what do you need in your life to be comfortable and happy, and then of course, so thoughtfully, what do you want to leave behind for other generations.
Yeah. I have to say, with financial caregiving, um, I got to experience ahead of time. It was kind of like a mini preview to spending down your money. And there are most of us are not prepared for the spending of the money. Accumulators and people who are working towards a goal are very good at working towards that goal, and the back end of it is really hard. And when you are spending down a finite amount of money, it's really scary. You have a lot of thoughts of, like, I have a whole section of the book that's how to make the money last, right? By the time you are 76, as my mom was, that's the money you have. There's not a whole lot that gets generated new after that point. And when the caregiving costs just keep going up and up and up, my mom's, caregivers cost $12,000 a month. And, there's not a lot of fortunes that will sustain $12,000 a month in spending on just caregiving. One person I interviewed for the book, her mother was in dementia care, in memory care for 12 years. And they just kept spending down the money and spending down the money and spending down the money, and the woman's brother, woke up like 2 years before the end. It was like, holy cow, we're getting close. We're gonna have to watch it. And the person I interviewed was like, we're already watching it. Don't worry. But the mother ended up dying 1 month and 1 day after her money ran out. And she was pretty sick at that point and in her early 90s, and the kids had to decide, kids, but they're adults. They had to decide, like, mom is, she graduated from hospice, she's on in memory care for 12 years. Like, are we going to move her now? Are we going to put her on Medicaid? Like, what are we going to do? And they're like, okay, let's just pay for a month of the nursing home and, see what happens. And then, they paid for the second month of the nursing home, and she died. And then the nursing homes is like, you got to come get her stuff right away, or we're going to charge you for another month. And
Oh,
they're like,
wow.
can we have a minute, please? Like, you
Yeah.
know, um, we're not ready to do this yet. And, but, things move on. Like, the money stuff doesn't stop for anybody.
And as you bring up like financial independence, and a lot of my listeners are, that's the goal, that's the dream, and working towards like investing and saving to get hopefully there earlier than the standard age. But anything can happen outside of your control. Things that are in our control happen just because we
Yeah.
are humans and we make mistakes and life happens. But then you have so many factors, the people you love, whether it's your children or older people in your family or your spouse, like anything can happen to them and just throw your plan off track. So let's talk a little bit about that
Yeah, let's
too.
because I deal with so many people who have questions about every bit of minutia of their financial planning. Roth conversions, and what's their Medicare supplement going to be, and like they track everything down to the penny. Should I do this ETF or that ETF? And expense ratios, and I'm like, well, what's your mother up to? Like, how's your mom? Um, what are your kids doing? There are people, that family map I was talking about, that where like some of the lines might not be even connected by blood. Who's on that map? Like, who on that map are you responsible for? Because like, you can do everything right. I talked to so many financial professionals for my book. Almost everybody I interviewed in the book was a financial professional, but also experiencing this at the same time. One of the guys I talked to was head of wealth management in one of the big firms, and he had to help his mom after his father died, with her Medicare choices, and he didn't know what to do, and he had to ask his clients what to do. Like, he's like, you've been through this. How do I help her make this Medicare choice? We're all like only as good as the person who needs the most help in our family. So you can do everything right and set your own plan, but you then have to look out beyond yourself and say, okay, what are my responsibilities to the people around me? You know, is my mom okay? Is my dad okay? Step parents, your children, any one of them could need something from you, and that blows your budget up, and that blows all your projections, and then all the nice rows on your spreadsheet, they start to go in the wrong direction. Your accumulation goals start to get less, because we're all working with the magic of compounding interest. And if you take a hit um, in any given year and your cash outflows go down, then your growth is going to be impacted. And so you have to know what you're in for. Like, I'll give you an example from my mom. When she first had her surgery, we thought she was going to be like right back at her life, and she wasn't. And I went to her desk and had to sort through her bills, and she had a past due notice from her long-term care insurance. She had lapsed on her paperwork so badly that she needed to pay a premium, and it was $6,000. But I didn't have any legal authority yet implemented, because I wasn't expecting to need it. I hadn't enforced the power of attorney. I couldn't write a check from her account. I couldn't use her credit cards. I couldn't even call the company and ask anything about it until I filed forms with them. And it turned out I had to like write a check from my own account for $6,000 and mail it off to them, knowing I would eventually be reimbursed, but I had to lay out that money. Well, it's not easy to come by $6,000 in my regular life. So like think about that. Like, in an emergency situation, if somebody in your family, if you had to step in and cover for them, um, you know, what would that do to your financial plan? I had to shift stuff around. I had to make allowances for that so that, I could do that. And I got it back. Like as soon as I sorted out all the paperwork, they mailed, I had to FedEx them a check for $6,000. I find it absolutely ridiculous that when the money finally made its way back to me, it came regular mail. Um,
Yeah.
but that's just the way the financial world works. But, like that's stuff that you're not counting on. Caregivers, the AARP does an annual survey about caregivers, and the annual out of pocket for caregivers is about $7,000. So if you are caring for somebody else, that's the little stuff. That's, oh, mom needs a new pair of slippers, and I'm just going to order them from Amazon and have them sent to her house. That's a flight, or several flights. I had to take 8 flights during this time period, and not all of them were plannable at times when there would be, low peak fares. Sometimes I had to go last minute and, fly at busy times. And rent a car at certain times and be off work and use up vacation days and cover expenses and all sorts of things. I had to lay out the entire funeral on my credit card, and it was reimbursed because she had a life insurance policy, but somebody had to put down a credit card to pay for things. And it was like me and my brother going like, well, how much credit do you have available? How much credit do you have available? And like, who can plunk down a credit card for that amount of money?
Right.
So I ended up doing it. But there are always financial costs at every turn with this sort of thing.
And it just goes to show you, respectfully demanding, like, to have these conversations with the people who you will be responsible for is important, because if something does happen, it will put you at risk or on notice for things that you're responsible for. And so it is only right that, you're able to have these conversations with the people in your life to say, if something happens to you, I don't want to not be able to help. And so we
Right.
need to have these conversations, and this is what it is. Now, some of the things you kind of mentioned, your mom had a life insurance policy, you were able to get reimbursed. So it sounds like she did a lot of things right, like
Oh, she
as
absolutely
she went
did.
on.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear more about that. So, what are the things that she did right, and uh, how was that helpful to
Yeah.
you in the process?
My mom did so many things right, and some of them were her own doing, and some of them were my with my help. Um, the long-term care insurance policy came about because my grandfather had early Alzheimer's, and her brother had cancer. And when her brother died of cancer, my brother and I were my parents had children young, and my brother and I were already grown by that point. We were already out of college, and so they had a little extra money, and she got a long-term care insurance policy because she was scared. She was like, I just watched my brother die. I watched my father have Alzheimer's. These things are inheritable. I could have any of these things, and we don't have the money to pay for care. My grandmother ended up in assisted living and then nursing care, and her journey was about 12 years, and she ran out of money most of the way through. And my uncle and my mother had to pay for her until my uncle died, and then my mother and my aunt paid. And she didn't want me to have to do that. She didn't want me and my brother to have to pay for her to be cared for. That was something she wanted to lift off of us. And so she got this policy. My dad couldn't qualify because he had diabetes. And so when he needed some help, we had to pay out of pocket for that. And when that happened, my mom got terrified because it was blowing up her budget. The care is really expensive. And so my dad had a life insurance policy that was very robust. He was the primary breadwinner, and a financial planner connected him with a life insurance policy that they had long ago gotten, and then he had an annuity contract, and it had a life insurance rider on it, like a death benefit on his annuity. And so when he died, my mom was able to get some benefit from the life insurance companies, and that was the money she had for her. Because they didn't have, they were teachers, they didn't have a whole bundle of money. And but she got those death benefits. And so what she had, because she was the lower earner, was a life insurance policy that was only for a funeral. Like it was just enough to cover a funeral. But that's great because I didn't have to pay for a funeral. Um, and funerals are expensive. And, you know, I don't know what choices I would have made if that was on me to have to. It just wasn't what I wanted to think about right then.
Yeah.
The cost of everything. It was just like, whatever is in this policy is enough to cover it. Here's my credit card. And I don't want to think about that part of things right now. This is hard enough. And the whole purpose of that kind of policy, which a lot of, especially older people these days, have those kind of policies. That's the kind of policies that were sort of in vogue with their age group. And life insurance just isn't in vogue very much anymore. But it's really important for the people you have left behind. And more people should have it. Long-term care insurance isn't really viable for most people, but life insurance of some sort is, and it's important because we get covered generally by term life insurance when you're working, but you're independent. So, and if the people in your audience are self-employed in their major capacity, you have to think about this on your own. Like if something happened to you, what happens to those around you? Like it's good if there is, at the very least, just enough money to give you a nice send off, without anybody having to worry about it. But more than that, your kids' education, the mortgage, all
Right.
that stuff isn't going to get paid if you're the primary breadwinner. And it's really tough for families if they don't have that. It's worth the money.
Also, yeah. No, I agree. Regardless if you have kids or not, but especially if you have kids, especially if you have kids, that's something that my husband and I did years ago because it was just important, and we didn't want to have the other person, whatever it would be like, not just be single or alone and then having to rush back to work or have to worry about finances on top of the loss of you know the partner. So with that, there are some also other things we didn't mention, but I think are just quick to note that would be important is to make sure your beneficiaries are updated, right, on
Yeah.
your bank account and any investment accounts. That's something that anyone can do or log in and make sure it's updated too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a whole line of ex-spouses who have inherited money, and a lot of current spouses who are shut out because somebody didn't update the forms.
Right. And that's something you can log in and do, and you don't have to wait. You don't need an attorney
Nope,
for that.
nope. There's some
Can't.
easy things.
Yeah.
There's very many easy things you can do, and it boggles my mind that it takes a lot of convincing, and that's why I was hoping by being so open and honest about what I had to go through that it would help people understand and connect the dots. And like it was like I lived through all these hard things so that you don't have to.
Yeah, I love that. Are any last like words or advice that you can give someone who maybe is currently going through this or needs to have the conversation when it comes to managing someone they care about money or having the conversation about it?
There's a solution to every problem. I have not yet run across something that can't be dealt with. Just sometimes takes a lot of tenacity and stamping your feet and holding your ground and all those, things. But I think that your audience is probably very tenacious and resilient and would know that, you don't make one phone call and get a no and then give up. I don't think those are your people. I think your audience is the kind that is driven, and if somebody says no to you, you're going to be like, no, I don't accept that as your answer, and I'm going to figure out a way to get this done. It's really hard when it's some, insane financial complication and you have a person that you're dealing with who's sick and you'd rather do that. But, most of these things can be taken care of in one way or another. It's good to know your rights and responsibilities and go forward from there because there is a path. You have to find it.
You have to clear it and be brave to do it. Clear it yourself. But
Exactly.
I love this. This conversation was great. Beth, can you please tell everyone again the name of your book, when it comes out, and where they can find it, and more about you?
Yes, it's My Mother's Money. I keep things simple in my life. I'm just my name everywhere. So you can get the book information from bethpinsker.com. I'm Beth Pinsker on all social media. I'm Beth Pinsker on MarketWatch. I've been in the writing for 30 years, and I'm very easy to find. I answer questions on my website if you are still needing more information or have a specific situation that you can't find information on, and always available.
I will link all of that in the episode show notes. Thank you so much again, Beth, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.